Versus Us All by death row prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal with a remix by Immortal Technique. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We're broadcasting from San Francisco. As we turn now to my interview with author, journalist, death row prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal. Last week, the Supreme Court denied his appeal to overturn his conviction for the 1981 killing of a white police officer following a controversial trial before a predominantly white jury. Abu-Jamal contends, as well as a number of that the case was marred with racial bias, including the deliberate exclusion of African Americans from the jury. The decision leaves in place a federal appeals court ruling upholding Abu-Jamal's conviction. Prosecutors, meanwhile, are now trying to appeal a separate ruling for a new sentencing hearing because of flawed jury instructions. If resentenced, Abu-Jamal will face the death penalty or life in prison without parole. On Monday, I spoke with Mumia Abu-Jamal from his cell on death row. We conducted the interview from the offices here in San Francisco of Prison Radio, which has been recording Abu-Jamal's weekly commentaries for years now. The call came in from Pennsylvania death row just after 9 in the morning.
Have a collect call from
Mumia Abu-Jamal,
an inmate at the State Correctional Institution at Green. This call is from a correctional institution and is subject to monitoring and recording. Custom calling features are not allowed during this conversation. If you do not wish to accept this call, please hang up now. To accept the call, press 0. Go ahead with your call.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Mumia. This is Amy Goodman.
Hello, Amy Goodman.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Can you talk about your reaction to the Supreme Court ruling in your case, Mumia?
I can, yes. Anger. Disbelief and surprise. Surprise at my disbelief. I mean, you know, a million reactions. It's almost like Kafkaesque, you know, because of course, I know that certs are rare things, and I don't know what the number is. Perhaps 2 out of 1,500 might get granted. But in this case, where a judge writes a 41-page dissenting opinion, where the courts below said there's no prima facie evidence of a Batson violation in the case, and they use a rule that has never been used before in our circuit and rarely in the United States, where there's a clear split, not only between circuits, but in one circuit. You can say surprise, because, you know, that is quite rare. It's almost unprecedented.
You've almost exhausted all of your appeals, Mumia. What do you plan to do now?
Well, I'll have to talk to the lawyer, of course, about that. But, you know, the fight goes on. I am a believer firmly in without struggle there is no progress. Frederick Douglass used to say that, of course. It was true then. It's true now. You know, without struggle, there's nothing. There really is nothing. So we struggle on. We struggle on.
Can you describe where you are right now, Mumia?
Yes, I'm about, I'd say 4 feet away from the door. I'm in a cell. I'm on death row. And there are about 12 cells on this level and 12 cells above, so 24 cells in this block or this unit. It's relatively quiet. That's because other guys are locked in their cells, or some are taking showers and whatnot. But I like to call it a prison in a prison in a prison.
How are you speaking to us?
This call is from the State Correctional Institution at Green and is subject to monitoring and recording.
I didn't hear you.
How are you speaking to us?
I'm speaking to us using a personal phone call, one of 3 granted per week. So
They hand you the phone in your cell?
Well, they roll it up to the door, and uncork or unlock the pie hole, what's called a pie hole or a slot, and you're able to dial if you have money on your account or you have a number that accepts a collect call or something like that.
Mumia Abu-Jamal, your book is now coming out called Jailhouse Lawyers, Prisoners Defending Prisoners versus the USA. This is your latest book. You are exhausting all of your appeals. You hardly mention your own case in this book. Why focus on Jailhouse Lawyers, and tell us what that means?
Well, as I describe in other parts of the book, a visitor from England named Selma James, the former wife of C.L.R. James, the great historian, West Indian. I was talking to her once, and I was just telling her stories about guys I knew who were jailhouse lawyers. And when I mentioned the term jailhouse lawyers, she looked at me quizzically, and her eyebrows went up, and it dawned on me she had no idea what I was talking about. And she actually asked, well, what's that? And I explained it to her, and I was surprised that she didn't know. I mean, I do know that, for millions of people in this country, prison is something they know intimately. But for millions of other people in this country, all they know is what they see, say, on a movie or something like that, or something they read in a book. They really have little idea of what such a thing is. But when I explained it to her, and I said, these are people who are not lawyers in the street, but they're men and women, thousands of them, who over many, many years learn the intricacies of civil law and criminal law and divorce law and other kinds of law, and actually help others with their misconduct, sometimes getting new trials, sometimes civil trials about conditions. They're jailhouse lawyers, and she was fascinated by it. And she suggested, actually, that you should write this down, Mumia, she said. So I thought about it, and I said, I'll get back to you. And I thought about it, and it sounded like a good idea. So I wrote it down.
You yourself are a jailhouse lawyer. We interviewed Harold Wilson, who ultimately was exonerated off of death row, and he talked about the difference you made in his case, using your library time to help him.
Well, those were the days. Those were the days. Those were, years ago when I was quite active in that. Of course, in the last few years, I've been a little busy on other matters, but everything in that book is really a period and a place and a revelation about what life is in the holes on death row among jailhouse lawyers and their struggles really across the nation. So I have heard nothing but good things about it, and I think people will be surprised when they read it, because it isn't something you'll see on TV. It isn't something you really read about. To my knowledge, it's the only book of its kind. So,
what about street lawyers? That's the question you ask as a chapter of one of your titles. What do you mean by street lawyers?
Well, that's lawyers who are not in jail yet, one should say. The question is, what is their role in America? What is their role? And that role has, I think, an honest assessment has to be that it's been diminishing over time. And that's because courtrooms are increasingly the domain of prosecutors and judges who were formerly prosecutors. And with the mandatory sentencing laws and with some of the real draconian sentences that people are facing, sometimes jailhouse lawyers can do little more than, say, cut deals for people. So, you really have to look at them differently than one did, say, a generation ago. And that's because the law has changed profoundly.
What is the Ruiz effect, how one jailhouse lawyer made change in Texas?
Ruiz was convicted of theft, burglary or something, and When he came to jail in the 70s, he naively wrote out a complaint and gave it to the deputy warden. The warden promptly read what it was. Back in those days, you had to do that because the deputy warden would notarize